If you're Bible readers that look closely at things, when you turn to the 8th chapter of John, you'll see little brackets around in some Bibles around this passage. And that's because when they were setting the canon, 1800 years ago, there were some passages that they weren't sure about. And there was some indication that not, every manuscript had this passage in the Gospel of John, but they left it in. And so that's why I'm preaching from it. The other thing is that this sounds like Jesus, and you can tell me later on whether you agree or not. Then each of the disciples went home, while Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and began to teach them. Sitting was the posture of teaching. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and making her stand before all of them, they said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now, in the law of Moses, he commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And then once again he bent down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way. Go and sin no more." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Jesus is in Jerusalem teaching. And at this point in his ministry, he's attracted a lot of crowds. And he was going to come back to the temple the next day, and the religious authorities knew he was coming back. Everybody did. And so when he returned, they were all gathered there to hear what he was going to teach. But the Pharisees, scribes, the religious authorities, their plan was to usurp that opportunity for Jesus to teach some more, and presented a woman caught in doing something impure. Use your imaginations. Jesus was popular. The leaders knew this, and they were concerned that he was undermining their authority and their popularity. So they were going to expose him for what they thought he was, which was not genuine or authoritative. In those times, the Jews had laws, and this woman broke the law, and it was prescribed in their Torah that anybody caught disobeying one of the 10 commandments would receive this kind of sentence. She was caught in the act, they said. That's interesting. Chances are she was set up. And of course, through the years, people ask, well, where's the person that also committed this act with her? Oh, they didn't have him. So it looked like it was a setup, and it says so in the scriptures. But not only was she caught in this net, in this trap, they had hoped to use her as a bait and to trap Jesus as well. And you ask yourselves, how is it that the teachers and the religious leaders of the time would stoop to do something like this, to see a woman executed to kind of satisfy their wants and desires for what they believe their religious cause? Well, we're going to get to that in a little bit. But it was up to rabbis to not only teach the law, but to enforce them. And so of all these commands, that was one that was really severe. And so they were there as a legitimate rabbi, and there were no theological schools. Rabbis follow and apprentice at rabbis' feet, for many years, just in the same way Jesus had disciples. Eventually, they could have been rabbis if he had been certified, however you want to call it, by the teaching elders back then. But he was set up because it was a lose-lose situation. If he pronounced judgment, as he should have as a rabbi of the law, he would have lost his popularity in his crowds. He wasn't that compassionate person talking about love and peace, and his ministry would crumble. But if he did not fulfill the law, now Jesus said in other parts of the New Testament, I've come to fulfill the law and not destroy it. But if he had not pronounced judgment on this woman, he was basically saying, I'm not really a bona fide rabbi. And so they had him. And so it was lose-lose for Jesus. So the thing is the elders had the right, the religious right, to do it, to do that. And it was bad enough as Jews in Jerusalem, they had to suffer under the rule of Roman law and weren't always able to express their own citizenship in the way that they are used to doing. But then there were people like Jesus who came around and were preaching this love and forgiveness and reconciliation and more inclusive kind of message. So it was tough. And the thing is that it was their right to do that. This was the law under which these folks lived for probably almost 1,000 years up until the time of Jesus. There's actually in the Midrash, which is writings of the Jews over the years, if there are children who, and this is what I'd want my granddaughter to hear, if there were children that were disobeying and not respecting their parents, they too could have been subject to death by stoning. There are no reports of that happening in the extra biblical tradition, but they were eligible to be punished in that way. And I have 5 children, so don't get me started on this one. So I'm not going to do that to my grandchildren or my children, but that was the law. And why were these religious authorities being this way? Well, anger is secondary to fear. When I get angry, I say, what am I afraid of? And they were angry, but what are they afraid of? They were afraid of the fact that here was this rabbi who is giving a new look to ancient laws, and they could not corner this guy. They could not trap this guy. And so they were in fear of their spiritual culture that they embodied all their lives changing. And they were also in loss of their power and their popularity. But this is not an excuse, but it does give a reason for their actions. And when working on this, I'm saying, well, this was like 2,000 years ago, or was this 2,000 hours ago, or 2,000 minutes ago? Sometimes things just don't say. But then they were pestering Jesus, and what do you say? And he's down there playing in the dirt. He's writing stuff in the dirt, drawing in the ground. And we don't know exactly what he wrote, but scholars pretty much agree that he wrote something along the lines of, she's guilty. She's did it. She should be executed. The thing is that probably the only people who were literate in the crowd were the elders and the teachers. And so they wanted him, though, to pronounce judgment on her and get the crowd worked up. And so they kept bothering him to say, come on, do that, because there were some indications that maybe he would have done that, and then they would have had him where they wanted him. So then Jesus stands up from writing in the ground and says, what this passage is famous for is, many of you without sin throw the first stone. Another story to this that is not in the Bible, but Jesus says, those of you who are without sin, throw the first stone. And then this rock comes out of the crowd and hits the woman right on the head. And Jesus turns around and looks in the crowd and he says, Mother. If you're Catholic, it's really funny. But so, because Mary was thought to be without sin. So no, that didn't happen. But what's interesting is the people who walked away the first were the elders, the eldest, those who knew better. And so they knew that even though they were trying to keep a particular religious code in line there, that they themselves knew themselves that Jesus had challenged them. He said, you're perfect? Go ahead. Throw a rock. Go ahead. And then the elders left, the people who had whipped up the crowd to trap him, and they went their way. And so when Jesus is there with the woman, he says, has anybody condemned you? She said, no. And he said, neither do I. But then he says something really interesting. Go and sin no more. A lot of folks would say, like, well, she was set up. That wasn't fair. And why are these people, in authority, victimizing her when she shouldn't have been wronged in that way? But Jesus says, go and sin no more. He recognized that something had happened, that there was a breaking of the law. And so while he was encouraging folks not to throw stones, he was also encouraging this woman to let's live a little better life here and not let yourself get trapped. Go and sin no more. "1,500 years after this happened in the scriptures, somebody named Martin Luther, who did a lot of writing about 500 years ago, was always aware of this kind of dichotomy in the Bible. There was law and gospel. And law was something that pointed out to us when we are guilty of doing something wrong. And then there was those were consequences to those laws. And so a lot of them emanated from the original 10 commandments, and there's a whole, thing like 300 laws that, a lot of the more conservative Jewish sects now have, when they can work, when they can eat, when they can travel, all that kind of stuff. But then he said in the New Testament also, not only is there law out of which Jesus grew and did his ministry, there's also gospel, which is the good news. Actually, it means good news. There's mercy. There's the surprise of the Spirit. There is forgiveness. And so there's always been this tension in many religions with this, okay, we have this code, but we need to deal with things as society changes and grows. So I have some takeaways from this. The first thing is don't mess with Jesus. It's just amazing how he turned a lose-lose situation into a win-win. Had a good message for both sides. Hold your stones, go and sin no more. And a part of that is whether, even though the Roman Catholics believe Mary was without sin, don't mess with the Blessed Virgin Mary either. She wouldn't have done that, even though that's a funny story about that. The other thing is that, you know, the old adage, you don't talk about two things. What are they? Religion and politics. Why? Well, because they're most easily subjects that most easily to offend other folks. And also because they're the most fun and interesting to talk about. And I talk about religion and politics all the time with folks. And it helps if we keep our religion and our politics separate, although there's now this kind of blending of the two on both sides. But I think it's better to fight fire with water and not to fight fire with, fire and just like, denounce people, da, 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 da. It's like, well, tell me what you're thinking, well, what about this? And so I love having conversations with people with whom I disagree if they want to have a conversation. Sometimes you just want to rattle off facts and blah, 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 and everybody else is wrong and I'm right. It's like, I think I've met you before in the scriptures, but I think it's important. It's like talking to friends and accepting them, but having those discussions that may make us different. I'm not the same as anybody else in the world. And I don't care how long you've been married, you are not the same as the person that you're married to. And great that some of you have been married for decades, but still different. And those differences are to be honored as they get worked out. Neither of us are one or the other. There's no one side is right and the other side is wrong. They could do some wrong things, but in my mind, the right and the left wing are wings of the same bird. And so we need both sides, and we need to understand so that we, as a nation, as a denomination, as a congregation, and as a family, I talk to a lot of families who have problems with their political discussions. It's great when they can really work that out, where they can put the stones down and go and sin no more. Because when someone's pointing at somebody and saying somebody's doing something wrong, that old adage, you point at somebody, you got three fingers pointing back at you. Well, the folks who are really vocal about why someone's doing something wrong usually have an awful lot that they're trying to hide or not be aware of. So when I talk to people a lot of times saying, but they're evil and they're stupid. And I say to them in one form or another, go and sin no more. Look at yourself. Well, we need to teach somebody a lesson. It's like, well, drop your stones if you're guilty of something. But what can I do? It's like, well, you can either drop your stone or go and sin no more. And go and ready yourself privately to operate in public. There's some days where, I'll plan a day, but I'll bump into people that I maybe knew or even meet people that I don't know. And then the big discussion starters, if they find out I'm clergy, either they avoid me or they want to unload and tell me all they're thinking, which can be fun if they want to have a discussion. But those other people, drop your stones, but those other people, go and sin no more. Amen.
We do the hymn.